If I ever catch you by my crib, I'm gonna smoke you. I promise you. I promise you. I promise you.
This incident perfectly demonstrates the societal trifecta of ignorance stunting law enforcement's evolution: the citizens, local news, and the police. Preventing incidents like the one you are about to see will never happen without education for all three. I will delve deeper into this hypothesis in a future video, but for now, I'll hit it from a less granular level. Citizens do not have a substantial awareness of law. Well, except for you. Thank you for watching, by the way. But what I mean specifically is two things. One, most people are unaware of what truly necessitates law enforcement intervention, which is just a nice way of saying we are a society of cop collars. Two, when someone is involved in a police interaction, they do not know what they can and cannot do. So my hope is that videos like this and the thousands of others created by passionate journalists and activists start reaching more citizens before they become the subject of these videos. There is a tremendous ignorance with local news stations. They just do not have a true beat on the disposition of the law enforcement agencies they cover. They know stories about police can drive ratings, so they cover them. But in too many cases, that is actually a bad thing, because they are usually misled by the agency they are reporting on due to their lack of knowledge. Or worse, they are more concerned with protecting relationships, so they are not willing to say anything bad. Or more accurately, they are not willing to say the truth. Some local news stations do take active steps in accountability and transparency in law enforcement. But in order to accomplish that, it takes actual investigative journalists, like Jeremy Rogalski from KHOU 11 in Houston, Texas, Jody Barr from Queen City News in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Dave Biskobing from ABC 15 in Phoenix, Arizona. They are the gold standard in investigative journalism. If the roughly 2,000 local news stations in the U.S. employed journalists of their caliber, the impact on law enforcement accountability would be exponential. Many stations do have investigative reporters, but with all due respect, much of their work resembles nothing more than standard field reporting. The frequency with which law enforcement nationwide demonstrates their deficiencies by causing harm to both the citizens they serve and their own reputations is beyond disheartening. In every single episode on this channel, there are substantial details and explicit facts on how law enforcement is beyond broken. And if you haven't already, please do take a moment after this episode to check out some of the others. And now I will get to the reason why we are all here. This incident occurred on Saturday, September 7th, 2024, just after 2 a.m. in Auburn, New York on Katy Street. Auburn is about 30 miles west of Syracuse. It's a very small and dense city with a population of about 26,000, and it is known as the city where Harriet Tubman settled after escaping slavery. Something about Auburn that heavily contributes to this particular incident is it has a very high crime rate. According to macro trends, it is higher than the New York State average as well as the U.S. national average. It is more dangerous than about 93% of other cities and towns in New York. So with these stats, it only stands to reason that some residents might be on guard when it comes to their safety and property. However, this is not a justification to treat any and all suspicious activity as an actual crime. The full body-worn camera footage is available from CNY Central and the Citizen newspaper, both linked in the video description. It starts with Officer Joshua Ovitt arriving on scene in his vehicle and Officer Anthony Spinelli confronting a minor who is hiding in the bushes because he was being chased by a neighbor for looking in cars. The main focus of this incident in all the other news outlets is the excessive force used upon one of the angry neighbors by police. Which is fine, that is the most troubling part of this incident, but there is a lot more to this.
Come out of the bush right now. Get up now.
They were chasing me.
Get up. What are you doing?
They were chasing me.
What's your name?
They were chasing me.
No, because you're trying to break into cars.
No, we weren't.
You were in your neighbor's yard,
No,
trespassing
we weren't.
in their backyard. She's got you on camera, dude.
Oh yeah, we did it that one time. They told us to stop and we stopped.
You've been cutting through yards. What are you doing?
We didn't break in no cars.
Okay, but you've been cutting through yards all through the city. This is the second or third time.
We tell you to get from around here, and you come back 20 minutes later. What are you talking about? You stopped us
Every single night between the overnight hours, you and your friends run around all sorts of dumb.
Okay, let's take a quick exhibit inventory. Exhibit A. The kid was being chased by adults for looking in cars. This is a corroborated fact based on the kid's statement and a statement given by a neighbor who later arrives on the scene. Exhibit B. Officer Spinelli made a baseless accusation the kid was breaking into cars. Then he backed off that and brought up a trespass warning the kid got from a different neighbor on a different day. Then he makes vague statements about the kid and his friends cutting through yards, all of which is hearsay, baseless, or irrelevant. Cutting through yards is only trespassing if they were told by the property owner not to do it again, and they did. Exhibit C. A neighbor in the background said something to the effect of, "We tell you to get from around here, and you come back 20 minutes later." Not specific and irrelevant. Exhibit D. Officer 3 says something like, "Every single night between the overnight hours, you and your little friends run around the fucking city doing all sorts of dumb shit." Non-specific and irrelevant. So there is only one thing here that points to any possible criminal activity, and that's Exhibit A. And no, it's not the kid looking in cars. That is not illegal. But chasing someone around the neighborhood is. When little Wolverine here shows up at the scene and tells the cop he was chasing the kid for looking in his grandparents' car, the cop doesn't even admonish him for doing so. But it does in fact meet the threshold of probable cause for harassment in the second degree. New York Penal Law Section 240.26. Engaging in any conduct with the intent to harass, annoy, or alarm another person, including following someone in public. Now stop being extra, little Wolverine, and get back to the gym. Now don't get me wrong, I am fully aware that the kid and his friends could possibly be annoying punks. But there has not been one single goddamn thing said here at this ignorance orgy that points to unlawful activity by the kid. As a matter of fact, the kid and his parents could probably make an argument that his Fourth Amendment right was violated via unlawful detainment and relinquishment of his name under duress, as I am sure he did not feel as though he could just walk away, and a court would most likely agree. No one likes the idea of a bunch of teenagers hanging around their cars or cutting through yards. But unless these conversations include some reasonable articulable suspicion or probable cause of a crime, then there is nothing lawfully anyone can do. Freedom is scary. Get used to it.
I'm going to arrest your mother. Because you want to dick around and do all this all times of night. Where's your mother right now?
Okay, tell me what you think here. Does this look like a law enforcement professional properly investigating something that neighbors have been complaining about for weeks? Or is this just a visibly annoyed man-teen in a uniform taking out his frustrations on an actual teen being a teen because he cannot do anything about the situation because there is no law broken? This entire thing is based on they said, he said, without any real criminal accusations. There isn't even a curfew ordinance in Auburn. Spinelli cannot arrest his mother, by the way. That is just an empty threat. I guess he might be trying to do some sort of scared straight bit that he might have picked up watching Dr. Phil or something. But he's not even doing that right. Officers are not given enough training in the academy to be effective at executing psychological intervention tactics on anyone, especially a kid. It's not his job, and it only makes him look more like an unresourceful beat cop. In my opinion, he's barely qualified to be a peace officer, never mind using psychological voodoo. Speaking of which, it is worth pointing out that in addition to this officer's apparent inability to conduct a proper investigation and his severe lack of interpersonal skills, his arm movements also speak to his ability to emotionally cope with this incident, and quite possibly his role as a police officer overall. Research in nonverbal communication, emotional regulation, and confrontation dynamics suggests that aggressive gestures like this coming from someone in an authoritative position can be a sign of self-soothing one's heightened emotional state, and or an indicator of one having an easily aroused anger, a lack of patience, and a low emotional intelligence. Oh, and does this officer happen to remind you of another officer you may have seen recently?
If you have permission to be there, then how do you not find it?
So what exactly was constructive about this conversation? How did it contribute to the progress of this weeks-long investigation into teens looking into cars and cutting through yards that is clearly frustrating these neighbors and these cops? Does the Auburn Police Department not have resources to address these types of issues more effectively? I think the easiest resource for the department to utilize for calls for service like this is education. Auburn appears to have a large problem with calls for service for juveniles. For at least the last 4 years, Auburn PD has been including the stats for calls for service about juveniles on their budget proposals. And I can see why. The numbers are substantial. These numbers average out to 1.25 calls per day. But these numbers will never go down if this is how these calls for service regarding juveniles and suspicious activity are handled. Doing simple things like the following will dramatically reduce those numbers. Creating social media posts and holding neighborhood engagement meetings with agendas like understanding trespassing and suspicion versus criminal activity, directly addressing what police are lawfully allowed to do on suspicious activity calls for service. Educating citizens to be vigilant, but facilitate the alignment of expectations with lawful duties. They haven't really utilized their Facebook page to communicate anything about issues like this relating to juveniles over the past year. I hope the number of calls for service for juveniles isn't on the budget simply to just bolster the need for the requested funding. Also, some improvement from within the department is crucial in mitigating these issues as well. Conduct additional training with the officers on the importance of impartiality. Investigations must be based on facts, not because someone called the police first, or because it is an adult calling on a kid. And additional training on professionalism. None of the officers at this incident were professional at all. If an officer arrives at a call for service with similar circumstances to this incident, and the reporting party states, "Oh, I saw this kid cutting through my yard," or "I saw this kid standing next to my car looking in the window," the first words out of that officer's mouth should be, "That is not illegal." Otherwise, the department is doing a huge disservice to its community by not educating the citizens on where the lines are, and or the department creating investigative work based solely on dubious suspicion alone. Without doing things like the above and utilizing assets like drones or conducting strategic patrols in the area of the city that is being terrorized by these teens, then the teens' reign of terror shall continue. But these officers right here could have ended most of the tension immediately by just informing the neighbors of the following 4 things. If you see kids on your property, tell them they're trespassing and not to do it again, and try and get proof so they can be charged if they return. Or post no trespassing signs. This will skip the step of having to inform them first and facilitate lawful punishment if they enter your property. Looking in cars is not illegal. If they are doing more than that, call the police. Taking any action against someone you think is doing something wrong, like chasing them through the neighborhood, that's a crime. There, solved. All done without pointless debating, whining, ego assertion, and excessive force. But unfortunately, with these officers handling things their way, it just goes from bad to worse.
Where's your mother right now?
I mean, it's not a trick question. Where's your mom?
It's not going to prevent her from getting arrested. I've already made up my mind. Where is your mother?
When I first got here, she was like down at the corner.
What, you're cool enough to run around all the city, but you can't answer a simple question?
I don't even run around all the city.
You do.
I don't.
You do.
I don't.
Because last time you were cutting through yards, it was on North Division Street with your friends.
Yeah, because they live all the way down here.
So what are you doing cutting through yards there, too?
Because I'm with them. We're walking places. What do you mean?
Use the sidewalk. That's what they're for. Sidewalk. You walk on
We literally
it.
haven't cut in the yard in like a couple weeks.
Just today you did. Your neighbor's yard. She doesn't
No, we
want you in their
didn't.
yard.
When did we didn't cut in
You're
anyone's yard
you're
today.
on camera.
Not today. I don't
Okay.
remember going through anyone's
Well,
yard.
she said you were on there today. I saw a video and you were in the backyard, so.
I wasn't. Okay. I've been inside all day.
Until now? So
No,
you left?
I was all the way at the
So
library
you left?
earlier. No, I was all the way at the library earlier. 4 to like 9 or 10, and then I came home. And
So
I
why are
come
you in
back.
this bush now?
Because they were chasing
For
me.
what reason?
I don't know. They think we did something and we didn't.
Alright, step right here. What's in the bush?
Nothing. That's not my bike. That was it.
I pulled up as traffic. I live right on Fulton. I just got out of work. I work overnight right here at National Maintenance. I pulled up as I seen him and his buddies. I didn't see him getting into the car. I don't know this kid in the white, the other kid.
There's only one over here right now. So what's going on?
Well, him, a bunch of like 3 or 4 other buddies were looking in people's cars, and it's been going on for a few weeks now. She said she's got it on camera and stuff. And so I chased them around the block because I was like, yo, listen, it's not what we're doing. My grandparents live there, my parents' cars, they were looking in their cars. Well, him, buddies were looking in people's cars, and it's been going on for a few weeks now. She said she got it on camera and stuff. And so I chased them around the block because I was like, hey, listen, it's not what we're doing. My grandparents live there, my parents' cars, they were looking in their cars. And I mean, catch someone on
So it's
that
not
day,
just one person saying it, dude.
What?
That you're looking through cars.
I wasn't. I swear to God. I
So
wasn't.
what else are you doing out in the rain?
Because I'm hanging out.
With who? Where is everyone?
I don't know.
everyone ran.
We all split. We didn't do anything.
Why would you split if you didn't do anything? It
Because
makes
we were
zero
scared.
sense.
They were chasing us.
People don't just chase people for no reason.
Because they thought we did something and we didn't.
But ironically, there's a random bike
I
where you're
swear
hiding.
to God, that's not mine.
Well, I know it's not yours. Did you take it from somewhere?
It's been there. I just got in this bush. I've never been in this bush before.
Is this how you conduct every investigation, Spinelli? Instead of vomiting out baseless accusations, hoping they start sticking to the wall, let me show you how to follow the law and use logic in your police work. You have several neighbors here saying these kids are looking in cars. And because everybody on this scene is communicating vaguely and haphazardly, can we clarify that, please? Are they saying the kids were standing near or walking by the cars and looking in the windows? Well, then that's not illegal, and this whole detention is absolutely unlawful. But if by looking in cars they mean they were literally opening car doors, then obviously that is illegal, and the detainment is lawful. But if that is what happened, it hasn't been established by anyone on scene, not while the body-worn cameras were on anyways. It is possible that the officers were told when they first arrived, or in the call for service itself, that the reporting parties saw the kids entering vehicles. But if that is the case, the officers have not obtained or documented any evidence of that accusation here. Either way, this is still just a hearsay, thearsay, which means they have no reason to still have the kid detained. So at this point, these officers should basically just be informing the neighbors of the 4 items I mentioned, and then they could have wagged their little blue finger at the teen if it made them feel better, and then just call it a night. They would have only had to have dealt with possible Fourth Amendment violation and little Wolverine not getting cited for harassment. Oh, but they have discretion, right? So it's all good. No big deal. You know, it is not a coincidence that in my 3 previous videos, every single officer was operating in deference to something other than impartiality. And Auburn PD is keeping that national systemic problem alive and well in this incident by not even contemplating the possibility that the neighbors are being the slightest bit overzealous. They are operating with all deference to the neighbors. Being impartial is a peace officer's main fucking function. Their actions reveal a clear failure to uphold impartial investigative standards. They did not reference any actual unlawful behavior, and ultimately disregarded the teen's denial of wrongdoing, in part by saying, "Why would you split if you didn't do anything?" And "People don't just chase people for no reason," which are wholly illogical statements on their face. The officers tried to imply guilt based solely on the fact that the kid was out at 2 a.m., having been asked to not cut through a yard before, running away from adults who were chasing him, and then the presence of an undeniable neighbor-mob mentality bias. This whole investigation is covered in sticky undue deference to the reporting parties, and an aversion to assessing the situation fairly based on evidence, which undermines the principles of procedural justice and lawful policing.
So where's your mother?
At home?
My parents' cars, they were looking in their cars. You know what I mean? Catch someone on a bad day looking in your grandparents' car.
Yeah.
Could be a different kind of call.
Yeah. Let me grab your name, man.
Gavin Kirby. Everyone ran because you got caught.
Gavin Kirby,
You looking in cars, brother.
K-E-R-B-Y.
K-I-R-B-Y. Senior.
Senior. Date of birth. Good phone number. And what's your address again?
I literally just got home from work and I hear, not her, but her neighbor right next door saying, "Hey, help, they're looking in our cars." And I hear a bunch of screaming, so I parked the truck and just ran around the corner. I found a different kid, not him. He was hiding in the bushes, so the other kid must have ran.
Okay. We'll check the area. You can get back in your truck, man. I'll call
Yeah, I'm
you if we
definitely
have any. Yeah, no need to get soaked here.
He's got it all. But,
Appreciate it.
yeah, last I seen the group, they were over there, so maybe they're hiding out in between these houses. They were at the corner. That's why I got in the truck, because I was like, I'm not going to run around in the rain.
Yeah, I don't blame
I'm
you.
going to see if I can get like a face and stuff. But
Yeah.
they were down at that edge of that corner, and so they might be hiding around through in and all that. This is one of the other neighbors coming up
Okay.
here now.
All right, I'll go talk
But,
to you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, help, they're looking in our cars. I'm sure a bunch of screaming, so I parked the truck and just ran around the corner. I found a different kid, not him. He was hiding in the bushes, so the other kid must have ran. Yeah, definitely.
Can you just make sure you get his name if you didn't?
He's got it all.
Alright.
But,
Can you just?
yeah, last I seen the group, they were over there, so maybe they're hiding out in between these houses. They were at the corner. That's why I got.
So who are the other two?
The other two?
Yeah.
My friends.
What's their names?
They were down at that edge of that corner, and so they might be hiding around through and all that. This is
If they're your friends, you know their names.
I know you're not pumped right now.
What's going on, man?
None.
I don't know what the hell Diedrich was thinking here. Not only does he walk right up and threaten the kid in front of the cop, but then he swats Officer Spinelli's hand away. Why would anyone do that? It's beyond dumb, but Officer Spinelli's reaction is dramatically dumber.
Figure out what the fuck going on. Is this one again?
Yeah, that's one of them. We're looking for a little license with the afro.
If I ever catch you by my crib, I'm gonna smoke you. I promise you.
Alright, go. Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back.
Oh, yeah, my crib.
Put your hands behind your back. Hey, put your hands behind your back.
All right. That was crazy. That was
Back up. All right, guys, back up.
Okay, here's the replay. No narration, 50% speed, audio pitch matched, a reference time code, a +1 stop exposure, and text indicators for the commands given to Diedrich.
I'm gonna smoke you. I promise you.
Alright, go. Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back.
Oh, yeah, my
Put your hands behind your back. Hey. Put your hands behind your back. Alright.
It is 10.5 seconds from the time Diedrich swats Officer Spinelli's arm down to when Officer Spinelli throws him down on the ground. That is a long time, relatively speaking, for a physical altercation. But not only did this not even need to be a quote-unquote altercation, but it was Officer Spinelli's overreaction that caused it to be that long. Because Officer Spinelli is operating solely from an emotional place, he charges at Diedrich and spins him around and initiates a bear hug. But what he should be initiating is a twist lock or a rear wrist lock, both of which are the accepted law enforcement practice for placing someone in handcuffs who might be aggressive. We are already at the 5-second mark here, and Diedrich is told 2 times to put his hands behind his back, all while Spinelli still has him in a bear hug. Also, Officer Ovid has placed a control hold on Diedrich's left arm, which you will see continue to compliantly move back and up. But Spinelli either isn't paying attention or doesn't care what is happening with Diedrich's left arm. Diedrich is saying something to the officers here, but I can't make out what it is. Also, we can't really see what is happening with Diedrich's right arm. So worst case, if Diedrich was resisting with only his right arm, that still does not justify what Spinelli does. It is disproportionate and criminal. Spinelli releases the bear hug for about 2 seconds, and the third command is given to Diedrich for him to put his hands behind his back. But before they are even done saying it, Spinelli is already going back in to grab Diedrich around the waist. And do you see what is in Officer Spinelli's hand? Yes, that is his flashlight. What is it still doing in his hand? You cannot properly execute any offensive measures or handcuff someone who is supposedly fighting you with a flashlight in your fucking hand. You can also see here that Officer Ovid is doing the right thing. He's using 2 hands to control Diedrich's left arm. You need 2 hands to do a twist lock or a rear wrist lock or any handcuffing procedure. This just reinforces my thought that Officer Spinelli had no intention of handcuffing him until he was on the ground, because that is what he let his emotions drive him to do. And at the 4th put your hands behind your back, Diedrich is already up in the air, as evidenced by the fact it sounds like he's receiving the Heimlich maneuver as he says, Let's go back 3 seconds and look at exactly how Spinelli executed this unlawful takedown. Those of you with some background in self-defense or martial arts might have been able to already figure out the mechanics involved in what Spinelli did, but I didn't pick up on it right away until I played this frame by frame, and I definitely did not expect it to be this severe. So this is the point at which the 3rd and 4th command is given to Diedrich, and Spinelli is bringing his arm back around Diedrich's waist with the flashlight in his hand. Take note of where Diedrich's left foot is. It is close to the right side of the sidewalk and on the ground. Now, just as they are saying put your hands behind your back, Spinelli is actually starting to lift Diedrich off the ground. We can't see all the motion here because Ovid's body-worn camera is too close. But based on what we can see, I made this crude animation that roughly follows Diedrich's motion from when we last saw his sneaker before he got picked up to when we see it again here. Now a few feet to the left and up off the ground. And we can also see in this last half second Spinelli driving Diedrich to the ground. Watch Officer Spinelli's shoulder as it becomes almost parallel with his thigh. He was doing way more here than just breaking Diedrich's balance.
That was crazy. That was
Back up. All right, guys, back up.
Are you serious? That's a little bit too much.
He was given instructions, put his hands behind his back. He
You
tells
had to
you.
slam him like that, bro. You picked him 5 feet in the air. Like what?
You have to do that, man.
He's 80 pounds, bro.
Andrew Auburn, can you send medical to our location? We're in custody.
Bro, people be breaking into houses and shit.
Issue 1 in custody.
Let's get him on his other way.
Swear. Swear you are. This is Oh, come on, you guys.
Just back up for me, please.
Oh my God.
You need to call my man.
Not
Andy.
the
We just called
We
for
did.
ambulance.
Yeah, that's wild, bro.
I hope your body cam ground, bro.
They are.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's wild.
Come on.
Excessive force of, yo.
Yeah.
See what all this caused?
See what all
This cause.
Officer Spinelli, are you implying that this excrement was caused by the kid? It was caused by him because a mob of overzealous neighbors called you to come and save them from their terrorizing actions? And because you couldn't even rub together two little twigs of probable cause to light the angry villagers' torches and lead them on a victory march to the lockup, it's the kid's fault? You mean you didn't dance on the edge of an unlawful detention, engage in superficial arguments with a kid, behave completely dismissive and juvenile yourself, and demonstrate that you are incapable of impartiality, and then lose control when one of the villagers got out of line? That isn't from whence the excrement came? I think you will soon find out if you haven't already. You are very much mistaken. We can all think that Diedrich is a punk for doing what he did, but here's why we should care when officers like Spinelli overreact. When there is excessive force involved in an arrest, the prosecutor can possibly drop all the charges, and the person, whether it's someone like Diedrich or a real serious criminal, could get off or receive a lesser punishment just because the cop could not control their emotions. Then, of course, they can go on to sue and win a civil suit for tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. When Diedrich was thrown to the ground, he was unconscious for about 40 seconds. There was a delay in Diedrich getting medical attention due to some sort of miscommunication that caused the EMTs to respond to the PD instead of Katy Street. After Diedrich was treated, he was booked and charged with harassment in the second degree, obstruction of governmental administration in the second degree, and resisting arrest. What a coincidence. He was charged with harassment in the second degree. That is precisely what the officers chose not to charge Little Wolverine with, after he admitted to chasing the kid around the neighborhood. Do you see how this looks? It gives the appearance that the charge is just based on convenience rather than actual justice. Auburn City Police Chief James Slayton issued this press release a few weeks after the incident on September 24th. I will just hit on all the whitewashing points. I have put a link to the full press release in the description of this video. On September 7th, 2024, officers were interviewing a juvenile suspect who was alleged to be on the properties of residents for no legitimate purpose. These residents had video footage of the incidents where the juveniles were attempting to get into cars. The Auburn Police Department had received several complaints in the previous weeks throughout the city prior to this incident, but were unable to locate the suspects until this date. So being on the resident's property without legitimate purpose only requires police intervention if trespassing actually occurred, but that was never established here. If the residents actually have video of the teens attempting to get into cars, then why was Officer Spinelli going on and on conducting an unprofessional fishing expedition? Why wasn't there any arrests made? Receiving several complaints over several weeks doesn't justify how the detention of this kid was handled. The officer then advised Parks he was under arrest and to place his hands behind his back. Parks did not comply with the officer's attempt to arrest him. A second officer was nearby and assisted the first officer. Commands were given for Parks to stop resisting and to place his hands behind his back. Parks continued to ignore all commands. At this time, Parks was taken to the ground and placed in handcuffs. It sounds so clean and pretty like that, doesn't it? He didn't just advise him he was under arrest. He charged at him, spun him around, and put him in a bear hug. Did Diedrich not comply? Or was he just taken aback by the overly aggressive nature in which Spinelli chose to initiate the arrest? Officer Ovid had his left arm almost immediately. Perhaps he was hesitating or passively resisting with his right arm, but that does not justify a takedown like that. Did he really ignore the commands? How would Diedrich put his hands behind his back when Spinelli is up against his back with both of his arms wrapped around Diedrich? And apparently for the less than 2 seconds that Spinelli's arms were not around Diedrich, while still holding a flashlight, he haphazardly tried to grab Diedrich's right arm, but then he gave up immediately and went right back to putting his arms around Diedrich's waist, while giving him the third and fourth commands to put his hands behind his back. This was blatant excessive force as clearly defined by the Graham factors from the established Supreme Court case law Graham v. Connor. A use of force like that due to noncompliance, when Diedrich was not really afforded the ability to comply, is not reasonable. Diedrich was not flailing, pushing, trying to run, etc. He was not an immediate threat to anyone. So foregoing all other compliance options and going straight to an overly aggressive bear hug and then a takedown was an emotional decision, not a tactical one. No reasonable officer would charge at and then bear hug a suspect who wasn't fighting. They wouldn't keep a flashlight in their hand and then take a suspect down in that manner. all with another officer standing there the whole time, who, by the way, was doing almost everything right, except for telling Spinelli to take it down a notch, duty to intervene and all. Parks was not lifted above the officer's head, like previous statements made by the individual witnesses, but his upper body was controlled by the officer. Parks was lifted off the ground to decentralize his balance, and Parks was taken to a platform where he could be controlled. Upon reaching the ground, the officers immediately knew something was wrong. Parks had hit his head on the concrete sidewalk and was unconscious. An officer immediately called for medical and then tended to Parks. To suggest that it was accidental Diedrich's head hit the sidewalk or that it was because of his own movements is beyond dishonest. Officer Spinelli's motion and hold on Diedrich was continuous right up to and including when Diedrich's head hit the sidewalk. This wasn't something where Spinelli executed an offensive action and then Diedrich's head hit the ground as a side effect. This was direct causation through gross negligence. How can the chief say Diedrich's upper body was controlled by Officer Spinelli and also say Diedrich had hit his head on the concrete? I'm looking forward to the depositions to see how that question gets answered. As you may have heard, one of the neighbors at the scene said something like, "You didn't have to pick him up 6 feet in the air," and the chief actually wasted time addressing that in this release. And now I'm wasting time addressing it here to say this. That was obviously a hyperbolic reaction to a dramatic happenstance. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter if he was not lifted 6 feet in the air. If their perception on the height Diedrich was lifted was wrong, then so be it. It still doesn't make the force not excessive. And finally, from the press release. To dispel the false rumors circulating in the community, we feel it is imperative that we give the facts out as soon as reasonable. The reason is not to flip the script on the defendant, but rather to keep peace in the community. We believe in transparency and the community having the facts regarding this incident. Through honesty and factual reporting of events, we want to continue to ensure the safety of the public and the officers on the street. Unfortunately, this wasn't a completely factual accounting of the incident, and the fact that Chief doesn't have to include the details that I have included in this video is the only reason departments like his get away with whitewashing incidents like this. Because after all, who cares, right? People probably stopped caring the moment they heard that Diedrich swatted the officer's arm. It doesn't matter that someone could have, and has, died from similar excessive force, or that because of the excessive force, a prosecutor could just drop charges. I want to make a distinction here. I know those in the law enforcement profession and even some attorneys and judges may have a problem with a portion of my arguments both here and in episode 3 because it may appear I'm applying the Graham factors to an incident as though it is codified law. Unlike Miranda rights, for example, that came from Supreme Court case Miranda v. Arizona, the Graham factors are not codified law. But here's the thing. Even though I feel most law enforcement academies are severely ineffective, Graham v. Connor is part of all of their curriculums. So to have a mindset that we cannot have the expectation that officers should be held to the Graham factor guidelines outside of a courtroom in the execution of their duties is ridiculous. Because do you know what other case law is not codified law? Terry v. Ohio and Pennsylvania v. Mims. Officers cite these two cases every single day when they are stopping suspicious persons or asking people to get out of their car on a traffic stop. If citizens have to acquiesce to officers when they cite Terry v. Ohio to effect a detention due to observing a bulge in someone's waistline, or if they cite Pennsylvania v. Mims to demand they exit a vehicle based on furtive movements, then they too must adhere to the guidelines set forth in Graham v. Connor. They must always use reasonable force and not be driven by emotional instability. Do the citizens have to start yelling out Graham factors as they're dodging blows from a cop? I am very much a critical thinker and would be the last person to succumb to any sort of conspiracy theories. But after putting law enforcement under the microscope for the last 6 years, I am developing a suspicion that some police academies' current curriculum on Graham v. Connor is not to uphold its principles, but to avoid accountability for violating them. Let's take a look at how CNY Central, the NBC affiliate in Syracuse, covered this incident. The link to the full video is in the description.
Our Laura Lagarde spoke with the Auburn mayor tonight following what unfolded in the video and talked with the community about their response. She joins us in studio tonight with more. Laura?
Well, Matt, the Auburn mayor admits there is some tension with the community and law enforcement following this incident, but he's confident they will get back on the right path of trust.
On Saturday, September 7th, just after 2 a.m., after receiving calls for help about kids breaking into cars, Auburn police were on Katy Street, later locating a suspect in the bushes and confronting them.
Alora said, calls for help about kids breaking into cars. And then in the chief's statement, he says, juveniles entering property with no legitimate purpose and attempting to get into cars. It's a small discrepancy, but she does not mention anything else in the report about the supposed breaking into cars. Why would she not seek any information on the outcome of that part of the investigation?
We understand that members of the public are upset. And it's something that collectively, city government, the police department, and members of the public are collectively trying to work through.
This right here is where the report takes a problematic turn.
Retired New York State Police Troop Commander Frank Coots says New York law states a police officer may use force that is justifiable to overcome resistance to a lawful arrest.
Okay, so that statement right there is basically just like saying water is wet. But what they choose to play next from their interview with former Commander Francis Coots is genuinely detrimental to the public understanding of these incidents. I know Laura is not knowledgeable in this area, but this is the bad aspect of local news covering these stories I was talking about in the intro.
But when the public is claiming excessive force, an investigation needs to be done.
What makes it justifiable? That's up for a court to decide.
Mayor Genatino says...
What makes it justifiable, that is up for a court to decide. That is so disingenuous. Actually, I would say that is gaslighting. Aside from being in law enforcement for over 30 years, former Commander Coots has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. So he knows this information I'm about to share with you. But the majority of people who saw Alora's report, including Alora, do not know. When Dedrick goes to court for his charges, there is no part of that procedure that facilitates an examination on any excessive force used by the officer in the arrest. The only matter before the court is if Dedrick committed the charged offenses. There are only two paths in which a court can decide if the force used in an arrest was excessive. Path 1 has 5 steps. First, the department the officer works for has to make a determination that the force used necessitates an internal investigation. Second, at the conclusion of the investigation, there needs to be a finding that excessive force was used. Third, a determination is then made if the charges will even be submitted to the prosecutor. Fourth, as with any charges brought to a prosecutor, they then get to decide if they will prosecute them or not. And then fifth, then when the matter is before the court, they can decide if it was excessive or not. The second path for a court to decide if excessive force was used is if the defendant has the resources and the fortitude to hire an attorney and file a civil lawsuit against the officer or the department or the city or all three. And if the person happened to have gotten convicted of what he was charged with, then that severely reduces the ability to even bring a successful case before the court. So, does it seem like former Commander Coots is engaging in gaslighting to you? Yeah, I think so. Since CNY Central is clearly playing just a short clip of former Commander Coots from a longer interview, I am formally extending an invitation to him should he wish to reach out and clarify his statement. I wanted to take a moment to thank all of you for watching and subscribing. This past month has been amazing. To go from watching all of these other great activists and journalists and focusing on learning as much as possible over the past 6 years, to now having those same people enjoy and support my videos, it's just incredible. I am going to keep pushing and make more content that furthers this important cause. Please do leave comments and subscribe. You would not believe how motivational that is when someone is working with such depressing and infuriating subject matter. Thank you. I greatly appreciate your support.
I'm going to arrest your mother.
It is ludicrous. You guys have got to do something.
See what all this caused?
Then we're gonna end.